In February 2001, a 35-year-old unemployed systems administrator sat down at a borrowed computer in a small flat in London, plugged in a 56K dial-up modem, and began typing. 13 months later, the United States government would call what he did the biggest military computer hack of all time. Not the work of a foreign government. Not a terrorist cell. One man. A 56K connection. And a search engine he'd written himself to scan for computers that had simply never bothered to set a password. By the time he was done, he had broken into 97 machines belonging to NASA, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force, and the Pentagon. The United States said the damage came to over $700,000. They said he shut down a network of 2,000 computers in Washington for 3 days, in the weeks after September 11th, when the entire country was on edge about exactly this kind of intrusion. They charged him with 7 felony counts. They said he could face 70 years in an American prison. His name was Gary McKinnon. Online, he went by one word, solo. But here's the thing nobody tells you first. Gary McKinnon wasn't trying to steal money. He wasn't working for a government. He wasn't part of a crime ring. He has always maintained he was looking for something else entirely, and what he says he found on a NASA server, in a folder he says was named Unfiltered, is the reason this case never really ended, even now, more than 2 decades later. This is where it gets strange. McKinnon told investigators, and later journalists, that he wasn't hunting for secrets to sell. He was hunting for proof. Proof of something he'd believed since he was a teenager growing up in Glasgow. Watching the skies after a sighting he says changed how he saw the world. He believed the US government was sitting on evidence of unidentified flying objects, and on technology, anti-gravity propulsion, what some call free energy systems, that could change life on Earth, and that this evidence was being deliberately suppressed. So he built a piece of software, sat alone at night for a year, and went looking for it inside the most heavily guarded computer networks on the planet. And according to him, he found 2 things that should not have been there. The first was an image. He says he was inside a machine at NASA's Johnson Space Center in a directory tied to Building 8, the building, he claims, where raw satellite photography was processed before release to the public. He says he opened a folder of unprocessed images and found one of a cigar-shaped object, smooth-skinned, with what looked like geodesic spheres mounted on either side, hanging above the curve of the Earth. No visible seams, no rivets, nothing that matched any known aircraft of the era. He says he was about to download it in full resolution when someone on the other end noticed the intrusion and cut the connection, live, in real time, before the image finished loading. We cannot verify that image existed. No copy of it has ever surfaced. That has to be said plainly, because a claim without evidence is still just a claim, no matter how detailed it sounds. But here's what makes the case strange enough that it didn't just disappear. NASA never produced records to definitively contradict him either, and the case against him in the UK was eventually dropped without that specific claim ever being tested in open court. The second thing he says he found is the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the part that gives this story its title. McKinnon claims that on one of the machines he accessed, he came across a spreadsheet, a simple Excel file, the kind of mundane administrative document you'd expect to find on any office network. Except this one, he says, was a personnel roster. A list of names, organized by rank. And next to many of those names, instead of a conventional military designation, were the words non-terrestrial officer. Sit with that for a second. Not classified. Not redacted. A label, non-terrestrial officers, sitting inside a routine spreadsheet, the kind of file nobody bothers to encrypt because nobody expects a bored sysadmin from London to ever open it. If that's true, it raises a question that has nothing to do with UFOs at all. Why would anyone need a list like that? A roster implies an organization. An organization implies a budget, a chain of command, people who get paid and show up to work. McKinnon's claim isn't just, I saw something weird. It's that he stumbled onto evidence of bureaucracy, the most boring, human, unglamorous proof that something operates quietly inside the machinery of government, tracked the same way every other personnel file is tracked. He has repeated this claim consistently in interviews going back to the mid-2000s without changing the core details. That consistency doesn't prove it happened. People can be consistently wrong and consistently convinced of something that isn't true, but it does rule out the simplest explanation that he made it up once for attention and forgot the details. Whatever he saw, or believes he saw it the same way every time he was asked. Now here's where the story stops being about aliens and starts being about something far more verifiable: what the United States government actually did to him afterward. The case moved at a strange pace. For the first 3 years after he was identified, McKinnon was free, walking around London with no restrictions, while the US built its case. It wasn't until 2005, after Britain passed a new extradition law, one that, critically, did not require the United States to present actual evidence to a British court before requesting a citizen be handed over, that the machinery against him started turning. Legal scholars and members of Parliament would later call that treaty lopsided. Britain had to show evidence to extradite someone to America. America did not have to show evidence to extradite someone from Britain. McKinnon became the test case that exposed exactly how unbalanced that arrangement was. What followed was not a quick trial. It was a 10-year siege, appeal after appeal. The House of Lords, the High Court. 3 different Home Secretaries inherited his file, and each one, for years, declined to stop the extradition. Prosecutors reportedly told his lawyers that if he fought the charges and lost, he was looking at 8 to 10 years per count, up to 70 years total. But if he agreed to go to the US voluntarily and cooperate, that number dropped to roughly 3 to 4 years. A British citizen, accused of a crime committed entirely from inside Britain, was being told that resisting extradition could cost him the rest of his working life. Then, in 2008, something shifted the entire direction of the case. Doctors diagnosed Gary McKinnon with Asperger's syndrome. Suddenly, the obsessive, isolated, late-night pattern that had defined his year of hacking looked different to the people examining it. Not a criminal mastermind covering his tracks. A man with an undiagnosed neurological condition, fixated on a single subject for over a year, with little understanding of, or regard for, the legal consequences of what he was doing. His legal team argued that sending him into the American federal prison system, away from his family, facing potential decades behind bars, carried a real risk that he would take his own life. For 4 more years, that argument worked its way through the British legal system, while his mother, Janice Sharp, became one of the most visible activists in the country. She even ran for Parliament against the man who had signed the original extradition treaty, just to put his name in front of voters one more time. And then, on the 16th of October, 2012, exactly 10 years and 4 months after he was first arrested, Home Secretary Theresa May stood up and blocked the extradition, citing his mental health, citing the risk to his life. 2 months later, British prosecutors confirmed there would be no UK trial either. The case that the United States called the biggest military hack in history simply ended. No trial. No prison sentence. No conviction. Anywhere. Ever. Stop and notice what just happened. A man admitted, on the record, to breaking into the US Army, the US Navy, the US Air Force, the Pentagon, and NASA. He did not deny it, and he walked away with nothing on his record, because a government decided the human cost of punishing him outweighed the case against him. That is not how these stories usually end, and it's worth asking why this one was the exception. Here's the part that should actually unsettle you, more than any spreadsheet ever could. McKinnon got in using a 56K modem and a tool he wrote himself, scanning for the simplest possible vulnerability. Blank or default passwords on machines run by the most powerful military on Earth. He wasn't exploiting some genius-level zero-day flaw. He was walking through doors that were never locked in the first place. If one self-taught man working alone, at night, on a dial-up connection, could wander freely through almost 100 Pentagon and NASA systems for 13 straight months without being caught, the real question was never, did he find aliens? The real question is how many people who weren't looking for UFOs, who were looking for something far more dangerous, walked through those same unlocked doors and never said a word about it. That's the alert buried inside this story. The single biggest predictor of whether a system gets breached has almost nothing to do with how sophisticated the attacker is. It has to do with whether anyone checked the basics, whether a password was ever set at all. McKinnon's case is now used as a teaching example in cybersecurity circles for exactly that reason. The scariest hacks aren't the ones that require genius. They're the ones that require patience and an unlocked door. So where does that leave the list? McKinnon was last reported running a small SEO company in Leicester, largely out of the public eye, occasionally surfacing to repeat the same claims he's made for 20 years, including, just a few years ago, dismissing NASA's own official report on unexplained aerial phenomena as evasive. He has never produced the spreadsheet. He has never produced the photograph. No government has ever confirmed or fully denied either claim under oath. What remains is a closed legal case, a man who never wavered on his story, and a label, non-terrestrial officer, that either describes nothing at all, or describes something that someone, somewhere, decided was worth tracking on a spreadsheet, the same dull way they track everyone else. We may never know which, but the next time you assume a major secret would be hidden behind something dramatic, armed guards, biometric vaults, encrypted black sites, remember that this one, real or not, was allegedly sitting in an Excel file, unlocked, waiting for anyone curious enough and patient enough to look.